Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be taking a look at my personal favorite aircraft for flying in virtual reality in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. I've broken this list into two lists. One list of course will be all the PayAware aircraft, of which I've accumulated just a few, and of course the other list will be the ones that come with the default versions of Microsoft Flight Simulator. When I was first building this list, of course, I had to consider, what exactly makes a good virtual reality flying aircraft, and there's a bunch of different criteria that I used for this. The first one is going to be visual performance, and this is probably one of the most important categories of all. There are a lot of different aircraft in Flight Sim. They're all going to have a different level of performance depending on things such as their avionics complexity, having items such as moving maps and digital displays, synthetic vision. All of these have a big impact on the performance. Some VR aircraft are so poor in performance, and again, I don't have the world's weakest computer here, and I'll give you some of those specs in the comments below just in case you're curious as to what we're comparing here. And it just makes it so difficult to enjoy the experience. There are some ways to get around this, of course. What some folks will actually do is they'll do things like shut off critical digital displays to try to improve frame rates. But even then, sometimes you get aircraft that are just so hopelessly complicated, this is not one of them, by the way, that it becomes really, really, really uncomfortable to operate in VR. And that's kind of one of the other pieces. Another really, really important criteria, and this aircraft does it very, very well as well, is your visibility from the cockpit. One of the things I really, really like to do in VR is to look around. As you can see here, we're flying over the lovely, lovely islands here down in the Caribbean. It is a much more enjoyable experience when you don't have big, nasty chunks of airplane blocking your view. And that's just kind of another one of those complex things we have to consider. The next criteria, of course, is ease of use. Now, there are a lot of airplanes out there inside of Flight Sim, and some of them are going to be more complex than others. One of the things we really, really love are complex airliners with many switches and buttons and controls, but the reality is once you dip into virtual reality, it becomes considerably more challenging for the purposes of being able to actually control the airplane. We do have some limited access with our actual VR controllers for the purposes of grabbing knobs and pulling them. But at the end of the day, you need an experience that's going to be straightforward enough that whatever setup you have at home, if it's relatively simple or something like that, or relatively complex, it's going to be something you could do quickly and easily in virtual reality. And the final component, and this is very true with many aircraft, is how much fun is it to fly? There are many aircraft in this game that will give you the world's worst vertigo when you give a tug on the controller. There are other ones like this Pitts here, which is just a blast to fly. However, as you probably know in VR, you always have to be concerned with things like motion sickness. If you want to make yourself puke real quick in VR, look out a window like this and go like this. That's about as much motion as you need. Another thing you have to remember too is in Flight Sim, you have very, very serious turbulence, which is not reduced in VR, which makes things very, very disorienting. So you can have extremely, extremely fun airplanes, but you also need something that's got that little bit of stability that makes it a little bit easier and safer on your tummy, as well as, encouraging you to want to be able to continue doing it as well. So what we're going to do today is, like I said, we're going to go ahead and start with the non-payware aircraft, and then we're going to end on the payware aircraft to see what I think are the top 10 airplanes for the purposes of VR. Number 5 on our list is going to be this lovely, lovely plane here. This is the Diamond DA40 TDI. This is the diesel Diamond, if in more ways than one. This is a fantastic VR aircraft for so many, many different reasons. The first one, of course, is the visibility is incredible. You can literally look almost in every direction. You also notice this little roof here. Instead of having the traditional kind of fiberglass roof, it's got this nice little mesh thing going on here. The other thing which is fantastic is the performance. This aircraft runs wonderfully in VR. You'll have very, very, very little issues as far as controlling it goes, and that is just awesome. The other thing, of course, that we have is since everything is simplified on here, again, traditional instruments, we only have one GPS that we're going to be babysitting here as far as sucking up your frames goes, which makes this so easy to fly. It is not going to be the fastest aircraft that you're going to be operating in VR, but it is just so pleasant. And you can see just from the frame rate of me just tooling around here in kind of regular vision to give you an idea of just how easy this thing would be to operate. Now, there is another Diamond. There's actually several other Diamonds inside Flight Simulator. And the reason I chose this one, like I said, slightly better views, slightly easier systems management than the other ones. And again, the performance is also a little bit better in this one, which makes it so good. This is an excellent GA plane. It is an excellent, simple to operate kind of cruising plane. Its range is excellent. Its systems are excellent. It looks great. This is truly one of the finest ones that you can experience in virtual reality, especially if you're going to be interested in things like, kind of doing traditional kind of general aviation work, which brings us to our next one. Number 4 on our list is an aircraft that needs no introduction. This is the TBM 930, and probably the most flight simulator plane of the flight simulator planes inside of this game. This one is excellent in every way in VR. It has surprisingly good performance despite its avionics. It also has incredibly good performance as far as an actual aircraft goes. This one will get you going fast, it'll get you going slow. It's easy to operate, its systems are very complete. Those gorgeous displays, even when you flip over into virtual reality, still run relatively smoothly. You're definitely not going to get the frame rate of some of our other options here, but the fact of the matter is this aircraft is easy to fly, it's going to be easy to navigate, the displays are very clean and easy to read in VR. You get a little bit of trouble with some of the digits there depending on what headset that you have. And in general, it just runs so well, and it gives you almost everything that you could possibly need for a VR experience. The one downside with this aircraft, of course, is you're not going to quite have the visibility, and you're also not going to be quite as durable as some of our other options in VR. But when it comes to a complete VR experience, this one is probably should be much, much higher on the list. But that's what happens when you make lists and have to fight for your number 2, 3, 4 slots. Now, our next entry on the list may come as a bit of a surprise. It is certainly an airplane that I never really considered flying too much, but it turns out to be one of the absolute best aircraft if you want to combine low-level flying with a little bit of performance and still be able to go pretty darn fast. That, of course, is our lovely Robin Cap 10. There's a lot of really great parts about this airplane. Again, we're flying about Paris, France here. This one's not only a stunt plane, but it's a nice and stable and easy to control stunt plane. There's a lot of different variations on stunt aircraft inside of this program. And this one combines a lot of really, really good features into one package. For one, of course, it is fast. Very fast, especially for its little size here. You'll notice its visibility is absolutely excellent. I can see very, very clearly out of all the windows. Performance is very, very good. Again, we're only driving a couple different displays here, and you can see we've got our handy-dandy little GPS over there on the right. It is absolutely instant control, instant response. If I snap to the right and go pull back, it takes absolutely no effort to navigate this aircraft, which requires a little bit of different sort of performance slash tummy durability, I guess I would kind of call it, especially if you're operating in VR with it, which I said is the preferred way to use this one. This one's really, really fun to fly at low altitude. The systems handling is really simple. You've only got a single throttle for the purposes of controlling it, which just makes it that much easier for the purposes of kind of keeping an eye out and doing some good visual flights. You're not going to have the most sophisticated navigational equipment on here, which is a kind of part of the game. But again, the big thing with VR is it's got to be something that runs smoothly. It's got to be something that's going to be easier to control. And this aircraft definitely fits that bill. Our next aircraft is a little different, and that one, of course, is going to be the Astro VRUS. Virus, for those of you who forget how to pronounce it like myself here. This is a very nice plane for a lot of different reasons for flying in VR. For one, take a look out. The visibility on this thing is surprisingly good. One of the things that will surprise you when you do operate this airplane in VR, by the way, is how low on the floor you sit. You're literally on the floor, and you can see it very clearly here. The other thing I really like about this aircraft is that it's kind of give you slightly better options as far as being able to see what you're doing and where you're going. You can see this huge 2 Garmin displays there to kind of give us a little bit of a hand, which makes our life much, much simpler in a lot of ways. And the other thing, of course, that you get, which makes this a little bit easier, is you get that nice little GPS in the middle. And of course, because it is an ultralight airplane, your speeds are going to get very, 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 very low should you desire to make them go very, very low. So I find that this airplane, when you're just kind of cruising around, it's just easy. The controls are simple. You're not going to be too rough with the controls or anything like that. But it also allows you to get very, 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 very low and slow without having to worry too much about some of the complications of other aircraft where, like, you're suddenly going to find yourself in a stall or something like that. The aircraft itself also looks great. It performs great. It's a very, very easy. Again, you can see from my frame rate just kind of cruising around here that there's very, very little going on. Systems-wise, it's incredibly simple. It even comes with an automatic pilot, which gives you a huge advantage here. For those of you who are fans of the VL3, you've probably got this experience in slightly different ways, but it is just so handy of an airplane for doing this kind of flying in VR as well. So our final choice, of course, our number 1 pick for VR should probably not be a surprise for non-Payware aircraft. My number 1 choice for non-Payware aircraft, of course, is the Cabri G2. There are so many nice things to be said about this airplane. The one thing that I really should say, and yes, it's a helicopter, aircraft, not airplane. One of the things I would say about this that's kind of important is the fact that if you don't have a control setup that makes this one good, this one's going to be very awkward to operate in VR. But for those of you who do have a good throttle and joystick setup, you will be so pleasantly pleased, I guess that's a new technical term there, for just how easy this helicopter is to operate, how high the performance is, the fact that everything is just so smooth. The visibility out the windows in this is absolutely incredible. And you can see just by kind of zipping around here just how pleasant of an experience this is. Your range is going to be relatively limited. Your speed is going to be relatively limited. But when it comes to, I think I'm going to do some flying around in VR today, and I'm not going to use one of the payware planes. This would be my almost always go-to, just because of how easy it is to operate, how much fun it is to just rip around at full speed, and just how easy it is to just, I'm going to take a look at this piece of scenery for a minute, pulling that nose up just a tiny bit, so letting it slow down, go ahead now, get right on that collective and just tap it just like that. It's such a nice helicopter, and it is absolutely my number one when it comes to non-payware aircraft inside of Flight Sim for the purposes of flying around in VR. Again, frame rate is great in this one. The visibility is good. You don't have anything fancy as far as you do have a GPS down there, which works really, really well. And you have nothing else fancy, but that's all you really need when it comes to kind of flying around and kind of taking a look around. Obviously, I wouldn't fly this in IFR conditions or anything like that, but it really does a nice job of kind of capturing so much of what's pleasant about flying in VR. So as you can see, we've seen a pretty good number of aircraft today, a good wide variety of them. And really, there are no bad aircraft. The big thing is, for me, this is again personally, is that the performance has to be there. If the performance is poor, or if I have to start shutting off avionics for the purposes of getting a decent flight, it's not going to be pleasant for me. If it's something where I'm constantly fiddling with different handles and adjusting mixtures and like pulling cow flaps and stuff like that, that's not going to be as much fun, in my opinion, for VR. There's some great other aircraft on here. You'll notice the Cessna 172 didn't make it. You didn't see the Cessna 152 didn't make it. You probably also observed that, any of the built-in airliners didn't make it because they just didn't either have that woo factor that I felt that some other ones did, or again, there was a performance issues that made it more challenging. Now, if you have a supercomputer with like a 4090 and, the latest in Intel chips, you probably will have a much easier time of it. But again, keep in mind, this is basically what I have. So in the next video, of course, we're going to be taking a look at the payware options for these. These are actually harder to compile because in general, it's tougher to find a payware that's going to run smoothly because so many of them are ports, or the way that they do the gauges use some kind of external item. But we'll get to that in the next video. Enjoy.